Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh. The Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Ripp. Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Ripp live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.
Kids early on figure out the relationship with siblings is different than friends. It's like, you know what? I give you the worst of who I am, and you can't get away from me.
That's
like,
right.
You're always going to have to live with me. And a lot of those questions with boys when I sit with parents are, is this normal?
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Christy Wright Show, where faith meets personal development so you can have a bigger faith and a better life. I'm so excited because today we are talking about something that you need. Are you ready for it? Help. Why you need help and how to get it, and even which areas of your life you might need help in. And then I get to sit down with a man that has made a huge impact in my life. He's an author and a counselor, David Thomas, and we're going to talk about how this plays out in the work that he does. But first, let's talk about why you need help. I want to share a story with you, and out of the gate, I want to go ahead and confess this is a very personal story, so I'm going to try not to cry, okay? So stick with me. About 6 months ago, I was driving to work, and I was going down 65 South, heading to the office, and I called my mom just to see how she was doing. And she picked up the phone. I was like, hey, what are you up to? She's like, oh, I've got some cakes to make and this, that, and the other. And she said, how are you? And y'all, I broke. I have no idea what was going on at that day, at that time, or what in her words caused that to happen. But it was literally like the dam broke and my eyes just started filling with tears and I started bawling. Like, sobbing, crying. I'm sure my mom was on the other end of the line, super concerned, as any mother would be, but also like, what happened? I just felt like all of the anxiety, fear, pressure, guilt, worry, exhaustion, concern that I had been carrying for not just months, but for years, broke in that moment. And I began to pour out my heart to my mom on the phone through sobs of all the things I was scared about, of all the things I had been worried about, of all the things that I had been holding in me that, to be honest, y'all, I didn't even realize were in me. I didn't realize I'd been harboring all of this, walking around, putting on a smiling face like, I got this. I totally got this. Okay, we're going to do this and this. We've got a plan. Okay, check this box. I'm fine. I'm great. I got it. I didn't realize until that conversation with my mom and that car ride, how much I had been trying to hold it together, but inside was just absolutely hurting, worrying, struggling with some stuff with my son and how hard it had been. And what happened in that moment in the phone call with my mom is that I began to be honest. I said things to my mom that I had never said out loud to anyone, not even my husband. I said, I don't want this to happen, and I'm scared of this happening, and I'm worried about this, and no mother would ever want this. And I just poured out my heart to her. And after a few minutes of her listening, which she's so wonderful at doing, and me crying so many tears, crying all my makeup for the day off of my face for sure as I'm driving down 65, I said, I think I just need to talk to someone. I think I need to go to counseling. And she said, I think you're right. I said, I just need to talk to someone. I need to talk to someone that can help me process this thing that I am carrying that I did not realize was weighing so heavy on my heart. Well, recently, I had Sissy Goff here on the Christy Wright Show, and I knew she was a part of Daystar Counseling, which is a fantastic counseling service here in Nashville that focuses on children and families and family dynamics. And so I sent her a message on Instagram, and I said, hey, I know that y'all do counseling for kids, but do you do anything for grownups? like for the parents of those kids that are having a hard time. I said, I just I think I need to talk to someone. I don't think I'm doing okay. And she was wonderful. And she referred me to her partner at the practice, David Thomas. I was able to get an appointment. They could get me in a couple weeks later. And on this particular day, it was a Thursday afternoon, which is typically my writing day. And so I'm working from home on those days. And on this particular day, it was a threat of tornadoes. Like schools were closing, schools were canceling. It was like there was going to be tornadoes in Nashville. And so everybody's kind of coming up with their game plan to get home and get into a safe space. And I remember thinking, maybe we should move this counseling session to Zoom. So I'm trying to figure out the logistics of this. Are we going to keep the appointment? I really wanted to keep it because I knew they were hard to get in with and I didn't want to push it back, weeks and months. And so I ended up deciding, I was like, I think that my husband should do the virtual appointment. He can join by Zoom so he can be available to pick up Carter if the school closes, but I need to be there. Like I just felt this strong urge. Spoiler alert, that's the Holy Spirit, y'all. Okay, if you ever feel a strong urge, it's the Holy Spirit. It's not your gut. It's not your intuition. That is the Holy Spirit moving you in the direction God wants you to go. I felt this strong urge. I needed to go. I needed to go and be in that place, not joined by Zoom. And so we set up that plan. We were going to keep the appointment. My husband joined on Zoom and I pulled up and y'all walked in and it is this adorable yellow house that looks like something out of Pleasantville. It was adorable. You walk in, they've got candles burning. They've got these adorable throw pillows on the couches. They've got therapy dogs. Like it is the most warm, inviting, wonderful, precious place I've ever seen. They called me back and I went back and sat down with David Thomas. And y'all, I had wrestled with setting up this appointment to begin with. I was like, I don't know if I really need it. Maybe I'm just having a bad day. Tried to talk myself out of it. But I get there and I sit down. And in 50 minutes, that man set me free from so much of what I had been carrying. He coached me and counseled me. He talked to Matt and I about what we were struggling with and what our questions were and what our concerns were and what was normal and what was okay and how to deal with what was really hard. And he gave us such grace and wisdom and freedom that I promise you, I walked out of that office feeling 100 pounds lighter. I felt like I floated out of the room. I had walked in so heavy-hearted. And that one interaction with someone that knew the struggles I was having, that understood from a professional perspective what I was going through and had the training and expertise and experience to counsel me, to guide me, to teach me, to train me, but also to encourage me in that struggle. You couldn't put a price on it. You couldn't put a value on it. I cannot speak highly enough of getting help. I don't know what help you need. I don't know if it's in your marriage. I don't know if it's with a child. I don't know if it's just some anxiety or something you're struggling with. Maybe something practical like a health issue. I've talked about this recently where I've been going to see a spinal surgeon and getting physical therapy for my back pain. you can't see it, but I've got a mat, one of those hairdresser mats under my feet right now off camera to help me alleviate some of the strain on my back. I don't know what that is for you, but I just want to encourage you. Get help. It's not weakness. It's wisdom. There are people out there that can set you free. There are people out there that can counsel you and guide you and give you advice that can literally change your life. Can literally change your life in practical ways, with back pain, in emotional ways, in spiritual ways, whatever that looks like. God used David Thomas on that day to speak to me, to encourage me, and to teach me what I needed in that moment. God can speak to you directly, and sometimes he will. He can speak to you through events, and sometimes he will. More often than not, God uses people. God uses people to speak to you, to meet you where you are, to encourage you and train you and give you what you need in the moment. But it's up to you to go get that help that you need. All right, y'all, I'm so excited because I get to sit down with someone that I have so looked forward to talking to, author, counselor, and someone that has made such an impact in my life, David Thomas. David, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
When we were talking about, planning topics for the Christy Wright Show, and we do this every month or so, I had this idea months ago, and I think we've just had to work on schedules and stuff to get you here. But I thought, this is something I want to talk about, because I think that not only have I experienced in my life the benefit of getting help, but I see so many people that walk around every day and they carry pain or struggles or frustrations, and they feel like they just have to live with that. And so I thought, you know what? You are someone that has, in a very, very short amount of time, made a huge impact in my life personally, which I've shared a little bit about. But I'd love to hear from you. Tell our listeners and viewers what you do and what your heart is to help people, but also even in that idea, what do you see when it comes to people that are walking around with pain or difficulty or struggles? And just talk a little bit about kind of what you're seeing out there, because I know you do this all day, every day.
I do, and have done this work for 25 years now.
Yeah.
So I work with just the pediatric population. I'm with this great practice here in Nashville that we serve kids, adolescents, and families. And we do the work in a little different way in that we're in a house rather than an office. Yep. Our most sought after therapists are therapy dogs, not the humans. Yeah. We're all aware we're in line behind them somewhere. Yeah. But that's a snapshot of how, if you've ever taken kids you love to counseling or gone yourself, it's a scary experience. Yeah. So we do as much as we can to try to make it comfortable, disarming, at ease when they walk through our doors. So I love the work. I'm so grateful to get to do the work. And clearly, as you said, I believe in people getting help. Yeah. And I think I believe in it so much working with kids and adolescents of if we can get in front of some things, like if we can press in those early stages of development, think about everything we know about how kids' brains work and how they learn. Like if kids learn a second language or a new instrument when they're little, like their little brains can just like soak it up. Whereas if I decide to take up a new instrument at this point, like it's not going to be impossible, but it's going to be hard. Right. So the idea of just teaching new skills, equipping kids, really pressing into our kids' emotional development on the front side, I just believe in it so much. So I'm grateful you let me come into this time and just talk more about it.
Yeah, well, it's so fascinating because we were talking even before we started recording, and your book, Wild Things, which, the title is so fun of where the wild things are. But the idea that as parents, I think we're supposed to just know what to do, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're supposed to just figure it out, and we're supposed to just innately know what to do. And there is an aspect of intuition, certainly we have as parents. But I think that because we feel this pressure to know it, to know what to do, how to do, what's normal, what's not normal, how to discipline, how to correct, I think we don't seek help. I think that we don't, we think there has to be an on-fire problem to get outside help. And I have been I have benefited so much from books or podcasts. We were talking about your book, how I read the chapter on the age that my son Carter's in, and how normal I felt after reading that, going, oh my gosh, like the weird things he does that are maddening and frustrating and exhausting are actually super normal developmentally. And so I think when you start to look at how outside help, whatever that may be, whether it's a counseling session or it is a podcast or a book you read or whatever, how it can open your eyes and set you free from the pressure you've been feeling. But it can also give you practical tips and steps and things to do. So let's talk a little bit about when someone is let's talk about kids specifically, since that's what you do. But this can apply to anything.
Sure.
For all the parents watching, if they might feel like, oh, is this normal or not? Should I seek help or not? I'm super frustrated. Is this just part of being a parent? Do you have any type of parameters of hey, if you're feeling this, or if you're unsure about this, or if you're seeing this, it would be good to look into, not in a diagnosis, there's bad news, we've got this stigma on counseling, but just hey, this could help you if you seek someone that knows what they're doing in this area.
Yes. And I would even challenge any person listening, think about the wisdom of a well visit. Every one of us knows we don't just go to the doctor when we're sick. We should be going when we're well, right? Just to check in. Am I on track? Is my health and where it should be at this point? We do this with our kids. We take them for pediatric well visits. One of my favorite parts of the work I do is what we call parent consultations. And it's like a well visit. Yes. It's parents coming in and saying, we're not in crisis. The house is not on fire, but I've got some questions. And to your great description, a lot of those questions with boys, when I sit with parents are, is this normal?
Right.
Should he be doing this?
Because they are so weird.
They are. And their hardwiring is unique. And I think for so many moms, I find in particular, not growing up in that skin. And I've worked with a lot of moms who are like, I only had sisters. So like, this little being is foreign to me. And it makes more sense to my husband, doesn't make sense to me. So I love coming together with parents to circle around those questions. The other thing I'd say to that too is, a high percentage of kids go out into the world. This is true from preschool all the way up. And they just knock it out of the park with teachers and coaches and other parents when they spend time in their home. And then they come home and with their safe people, they kind of go off the rails sometimes. That's where we see the most evidence of what's really going on. And I think it's where it can take parents to a place of thinking, okay, what am I doing wrong that all the other grown-ups in the world seem to be doing right? Because I'm getting these great reports at parent-teacher conferences or coaches love working with him, but he's struggling so much at home. And I think even that, I love to speak into the normal of that and to say, there's a great chance you're not doing anything wrong. It's a great chance you're doing everything right. He feels so safe with you, the freedom to just struggle greatly in this space that he wouldn't feel out in the world in the same way. I laugh with parents and say, I think it's where kids early on figure out the relationship with siblings is different than friends. It's like, you know what? I give you the worst of who I am and you can't get away from me. You're always going to have to live with me. But they figure out with friends, friends could come and go. Friends could kind of wash their hands of me and say, I'm done. And so it's, again, that safety that creates a lot of play, a lot of room for struggle to happen that I want to speak into the normal of that with parents.
Yes. Well, even as you say that, it reminds me of when I very first put Conley in preschool. So he was 2. He was super young. It was his first preschool experience. So we didn't know what to expect. But truly, it was like a Mother's Day out program. So it was years ago. But I remember I would pick him up every day. And the teacher would say, David, he is such a leader. He's our best listener. He cleans up every day. I'm like, are we talking about the same child? Because I don't experience any of that inside our household. But you do. You internalize that and you think, there's something wrong with me. I'm doing something wrong. And I love how even just in that example a minute ago, you reframe that and you say, okay, your child as an example, your child misbehaving at home and then behaving really well at school is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's actually a sign they feel incredibly safe with you and they're letting their guard down. That one example is so freeing for people. And I think one of the things that I've experienced, whether it's been counseling in my marriage, counseling personally, counseling with kids, or anything, getting help in a medical issue like we've talked about, getting help in any area, when you pursue that and then intersect this information, it changes how you experience your reality. It changes how you experience your child misbehaving at home. It changes how you even when Matt and I would go to counseling and we'll talk about an issue, because that counselor helps me understand him and how he's wired and vice versa, it changes how I experience what could have been a conflict and helps me understand, oh, wow, he's processing this way, I'm processing this way. And our reality didn't change, but because of the information, our experience of it did.
Absolutely.
And so talk a little bit about, I know that you work with a lot of families, but how does not just the parenting issue, but even parents that you talk to, individuals, how does this change how they feel about themselves? Because I will say, when I walked out of your office, and I've shared this story before, but when I walked out of there, it did not just change how I experienced Conley. It changed how I experienced myself as a parent. And that's really powerful.
I agree with you. And I think I've long said that I think one of the greatest gifts we can give the kids we love is doing our work. I really do. I think to the degree that we know our story, that I know my strengths and my struggles, I'm going to operate differently in this world in every relationship, including that relationship with my kids. And so I don't think we can dive deep enough into that place as parents, which is so in keeping with the very thing we're talking about today of I can't do that well without some support. I can't see everything that's true about me. I'm limited by my perspective. I need other eyes on my life in a way that there's opportunity for growth and development that benefits my work, it benefits my marriage, it benefits my parenting. And I think it's the wisdom, too, of, if you or I were driving down the road and the check engine light comes on in my car, I'm not going to assume I know how to diagnose that circumstance. And I need a mechanic, and that is a good thing. I'm grateful there are folks who train and know how to deal with my car. it's fascinating to me that we would assume that posture with our vehicle or with different parts of our lives, but wouldn't with our own well-being, our own mental health. And I think it's just a good thing to put other eyes on a circumstance that someone could see something I can't see and create opportunity for growth.
I love that analogy because everyone listening is like, well, yeah, if my check engine light came on, I'd for sure take it to the shop. But I feel like too, and I've talked to Dr. John Deloney, one of our Ramsey personalities, about this. I feel like there's still, even in my generation of parents, individuals, there's this stigma around counseling. There's this stigma around seeking out help. I know the older generations, like there definitely is. With my mom's generation, the baby boomers, like if you go to counseling, like something's wrong with you, you're a crazy person, whatever, which is not at all true. Like you said, a well checkup as a great example. Talk a little bit about maybe some people that feel resistant to getting help. And counseling is not the only way to get help, but as an example, resistant to seeking that expert help, that mechanic, if you will, because they feel like, well, the car's still running. The check engine, like, I've got anxiety every morning, or I'm can't sleep at night. But I mean, I'm fine. It's just like I'm just busy. It's just a hard season, and we excuse it away. And we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. I'll tell you one of the things I'm so guilty of, David, and I think probably a lot of women wired like me are, I'm really good at coaching myself. So just when I go to like, okay, I really need to talk to someone, I'm like, Christy, you can do this. Have a good attitude. Like I tell myself the things I tell people, and I'm like, I can dust myself off and pick myself up and enough to keep going. But we're still limited by our own abilities, our own perspective, our own blind spots. Talk a little bit about that stigma that maybe, or even the temptation to pull yourself up by your bootstraps that keeps people from actually seeking someone outside, an expert, a mechanic in this example, that could really, really make a difference.
Absolutely. I'd say first, if we're willing to consider that possibility of what I said earlier, that, the greatest gift, not just to my kids, greatest gift I could give to my wife, my coworkers, every individual I'm in relationship with, is to do my own work, to see everything that's there. And could I share a quick story of an example?
Yes, please.
Personally for me?
Yes.
So we use the Enneagram a lot in our practice, and is a tool I really love. If you're not familiar, it's an inventory, a typology that, like many of the others, just let you go a little bit deeper into how you're hardwired.
We have, just as a quick reference, we have talked about that on the show and had Ian Cron on the show. So there's a recent or a past episode where they could check that out if they want more information.
Please do, because I believe in it so strongly. I'm an Enneagram 1.
Okay.
The name given to my number is the reformer or the perfectionist. So I'm somewhat akin to kind of the type A personality. I'm driven, efficient,
get it right,
hardworking, that's it. I have a very clear memory of when my kids were really little, 3 kids, and it was a Saturday morning. My wife was making pancakes. The house smelled like syrup. My kids were still in their PJs, had this great bed head. I walked into the kitchen while they're all trying to eat, and I was like, okay, hey, everybody listen up. We got a busy day. I'm going to take the 2 of you to your soccer game. Mom's going to take you to your birthday party. We're going to meet back up at the house. Your grandparents will be here. I'm running through this list, and I remember my kids just looking up with this kind of glazed over look, like we're just trying to eat.
We're just trying to have pancakes.
Absolutely. And my wife put down the spatula at the stove. She walked over to me. She put her hand around the back of my neck, and she looked me in the eyes, and she said, sweetheart, you are the only person in this house who is interested in your agenda right now. It was
that is so good.
I know. It was one of the most loving things anyone has ever said to me.
Don't tell Matt Wright that. He will use that tomorrow. Dang it, that's good. Because I am the you in that scenario.
Yes.
Bless. Oh.
And where I'm so grateful that I'm in relationship, as you said, whether it's your spouse, a friend, a pastor, a counselor, someone who can see things about me that I can't. Because if I run forward with that story, I don't want my kids to grow up feeling like this guy who was my dad was a bit of an employer more than a father. Like I kind of always felt like I was up for a performance evaluation, and it was always about a checklist. Like that's not who I want them to experience me to be.
Right.
That's who they could experience me to be if I don't develop enough awareness of who I am, how I'm hardwired, that, in my best moments when I bring that oneness to parenting, I can bring a lot of leadership and vision to my family.
Yeah.
In my worst moments, I could make you feel like you're up for a performance evaluation. Yeah. And if I'm not open to getting help, to growing, to learning as much as I can about my hardwiring, that's very much who my kids could experience me to be. So, I would say that story, I don't think it's just true of me. I think it's true for every one of us. Like we all have places for growth Every last one of us.
Yeah.
It's just a matter, will you avail yourself to relationships that allow for that so you can be the best version of who you were made to be?
Yeah, I love that example. And I'm like, oh, that has so been me so many times. And I tell some of those stories in my book that's coming out this fall about life balance, because I think one of the things that gets me out of balance is focusing on the wrong thing. So my example of that in the book would be, it's Christmas, we're in Christmas PJs, and I'm like insistent on getting a picture in front of the tree, which leads to just mass hysteria, meltdowns, crying, screaming, pulling ornaments off, like just the opposite of a good time. And I'm trying to capture what a good time this is, right? Like the irony is just amazing. And it turns me into someone that I don't like. Yes. And I'm not a great mom to my kids. And so I love how, even in reference to the Enneagram, there's not a number that's the right number. We all have blind spots. We all have weaknesses. You know, one of the things that I've tried to, when I talk about counseling as an example, but any type of help, I use the word coach, because I think of like in high school, you know, when I entered high school and I joined the track team, I had a natural talent to run, but it had not been refined or developed through a professional coach. And as my coach led me through drills and strength training and reps, my speeds got faster, my form got better, it got more, my stride was more effortless. So my performance in this sport was so much better because I got a coach. So you think of, okay, how much more important is my marriage than a sport or fitness? How much more important is my parenting than running or a marathon or whatever that may be? Why would I not get let's call it a coach, if that makes people feel better. Why would I not get a coach that can show me how to be aware and improve my blind spots, but also just perform better? And not in a performance like you have to earn your role as a parent or a person, but to be better for others and for yourself for the results that you want. You know, this life that you want, the marriage, the relationships that you want. So I love that you use the Enneagram. That definitely comes into play so much in Matt and I's conversations. Yes. And I don't know how much he loves that, because he's like, oh, here we go again. But I'm like, well, since you're a 5, I do see how you would process, you know, it's like, but it helps me, it gives me a language to the lens that he sees the world and I see the world, versus just feeling like, why don't you see it like I do? And I'm like, of course he doesn't see it like I do. He's wired differently. Yes. You know, one of the things that I find fascinating too with you, David, in y'all's practice at Daystar, you focus on boys, it seems like. And then Sissy, who we've had on the show, Sissy Goff, I know who's awesome. Your coworker and friend and also author, she's focused on girls. And I remember when we had her on the show, she said, she was talking about anxiety, because I know she focuses on that a lot, that anxiety can evidence itself in different ways. So some personalities, some girls will be very outward with it, with their behavior of their anxiety, a panic type of thing. Some internalize it, probably maybe the Enneagram ones, that it's like this internalizing it. What are some of the things that you see in boys or just kids, parents, the family dynamics in general? What are some things, whether it's anxiety or pressure from social media, pressure from schools? What are some themes that you see happening in our world right now that maybe people just need to be aware of? Like, hey, keep an eye out for this. I know anxiety is certainly one of them. Research shows, and Sissy shared this, of how anxiety is on the rise. We know social media is a thing going on. What are some things that you're going, hey, this is happening out there. It doesn't mean it's a major fire, but just be aware of it. Just be aware that this is happening, you know, in our world.
I would say, hands down, when I look back over decades of this work with boys, the most consistent concern that I have to date for boys is their emotional development. Okay. And think all the way back to when we were talking about pediatric well visits. From some of the earliest visits, you know, when doctors are saying to us, like, how many words is he saying? Right. We know research would tell us he's going to be saying generally, there's exceptions to this rule, about half the words that girls are going to be saying. Like, that's common with boys.
Stays true into adulthood.
Absolutely it does. And if that's true with his general vocabulary, it's going to also be true with his emotional vocabulary. So he doesn't have as expansive an emotional vocabulary. It is harder for him to name what he's feeling and in turn to navigate or take that emotion to something constructive. Okay. And that can continue to play out from toddlerhood all the way into the teenage years, all the way into the adult years. And so I would say helping boys develop an accurate, expansive emotional vocabulary is our starting point. And I would say helping them develop, we call it resourcefulness. It's an emotional milestone of just taking that emotion to something constructive, is I think some of the most important work we can do on behalf of the boys we love. And I think it explains or I should say the struggle in that space explains a lot of the scary statistics when we look at, who's most vulnerable to substance abuse? Adolescent boys and adult males. Not to say girls and adult women don't struggle, they do. Who's the most vulnerable to internet pornography, self-harm, suicide? We could run down some of the scariest statistics, adolescent boys and adult males. And I think it's evidence of when they don't know how to name what they feel and take it to something constructive, it creates so much vulnerability to trying to numb and medicate and shut that down. And so that has been, for as long as I've been doing this work, and to date, still one of my greatest concerns. The other that registers is, I was thinking when you were talking about pressure, I think we as males are hardwired in a way where we tie a lot of our identity to performance. And I'll start to see evidence with boys early on athletically. It's like they are seeing so much of who they are in terms of their abilities in that space. Adult men with their work. We define so much of who we are within our performance, which I think can set the stage for a lot of those vulnerabilities as well, as opposed to understanding your value and your worth not tied to anything that you do. So I'd say those two in particular stand out to me.
It's funny how when you talk about traits in kids or themes or, patterns that you see in kids, and research shows this. You talk about this in your book, Wild Things, and I know Sissy's talked about this as well with girls, but you can almost just fast forward to adulthood and you see those same patterns, whether it's the performance or it's the lack of emotional vocabulary in men, women, how we internalize anxiety. I know there are women listening right now and they're going, oh yeah, I am one of those too, of like, I internalize the anxiety, or it's an outward thing, for us to get to a breaking point where we just have like a meltdown. And I think one of the things that is helpful to me, John Deloney always talks about your anxiety. It's like an alarm system going off. And what I love that we're talking about today is, if you have an alarm system going off, whether that's anxiety or something else that you are really struggling with, there is help available to you. There are experts, there are professionals, there are doctors, there are resources, free and paid, that are available to help you in that area that you need help. But even if you don't have an alarm system going off, even if you're not at that breaking point, there is such a benefit to well visits, as you would say. Of course, I'm going to take my child to the doctor every year for their annual checkup. And when we took Carter to his 5-year-old checkup, his doctor identified something going on in his little body that he actually needed surgery. And it was minor and he was fine. But we found it before it got bad because we went to that well visit. And so and he had no symptoms. He had nothing that was even an alarm. And so there's just such a benefit to getting help, checking in with yourself, doing the work as you describe it, to identify the blind spots or even improve in areas that we can improve and want to improve. But it comes through getting help. And I love that. I love that reminder. David, you are such a light. I've talked about this before, but on the day that I came to see you, I felt like I needed to go. And that house, the house and the candles and the throw pillows and the therapy dogs, it was like you just, you're like, okay, you just feel immediately comforted, but your presence does that. And so thank you. Thank you for just how much you speak into people's lives, in mine, and everybody watching and listening. I know people will want to know how they can connect with you though. So is there on social media or website, your book, any way that people can follow you and just get that encouragement,
Thank you for asking. And thank you first off, just for doing the life-giving work that you're doing. I think we're doing such similar work, and we just want to see individuals and families thrive.
Yes.
And so I'm just so grateful to get to be a part of what you're doing. And if you would want to explore more of our work, I think the easiest place to find us is raisingboysandgirls.com.
And it's a podcast too.
Yes. You can find our podcast, our books, all of our resources. We've got a lot of, as you said, a lot of free resources on that site. And so that'd be a great starting place to learn more about what we're doing.
It's so encouraging too, because it's like the simplest things that you might think are weird. You're like, oh, this is really helpful from a parenting tip. And it's just so helpful. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for being here. I
Grateful
appreciate
to be here.
All right, y'all, I'm going to answer some of the questions that you sent in on social media. Let's see what we've got today. Why is it so hard for us to know what we want? I don't know. Do you? It is hard. Let's just talk about it. Let me process this out loud with you because it is hard. Let's go ahead and acknowledge that. A couple of reasons that could affect it. Number one, many of us, especially depending on your personality style, we love to please people. If you're a believer, we're called to please others. So sometimes I think we can get in rhythms our whole lives of making other people happy. Like think back even to high school. You know, there was a group of people you wanted to impress. Maybe it was the cool kids. Maybe it was just your friend group. You wanted to wear the right brands, the right clothes. Like you care so much about what other people think of you in middle school and high school. And rightly so, because kids are mean, right? Like you didn't want to be the one that's picked on. So we get in these habits early on in adolescence of like keeping up and pleasing people and doing the right thing and making sure that we fit in and everybody's happy with us. Well, then you fast forward to adulthood and we want to, get the right job and date the right people. And so there's an element of performance. There's an element of we wear this mask, right? Of like I want to be what other people want me to be. And at some point, hopefully, we mature out of that in a healthy way where we are true to ourselves and also socially appropriate, right? Like there's a balance of both. But I do think that so often we can get in habits that shape how we live that we don't know how to live any other way. Let me give you an example. I remember speaking at Purdue University. This was years ago, probably 11 years ago, one of my very first speaking events as a professional speaker. And I spoke on life balance. Clearly, this message has been in me for a very long time. And I remember a woman walked up to me and she had tears in her eyes and she said, I want to do what you're saying. I want to live for my values and what's important to me, but I don't even know what that is. It has been so long since I have even considered myself that I don't know how to. Now, I think in her case, it would be more like mine or anybody else that's a little bit older where life can just kind of make you forget what you want. Certainly becoming a parent can make you forget what you want because what you want doesn't really matter a lot of times because you are responsible for feeding those children and keeping up with all of their needs. And so whether it's ingrained in us from an early age, we had parents maybe in our household that we had to perform for and be good for and do all the right things, keeping up with kids in high school. Maybe it's becoming a parent and you just are so busy keeping up with your children and all of their unending needs. Just this morning, y'all, my son at, I kid you not, 6:15 was yelling for blueberries. I was like, how can you want blueberries at 6:15 in the morning? Like I have barely opened my eyes and I'm getting screamed at for blueberries. So like you're so used to running around for these little dictators in tiny bodies that have all these needs. Maybe it's that. But regardless of what it is, it could even be a job, where it's like you have to work all the time and what you want isn't really considered. I think it can be a variety of factors that contribute to us losing sight of what we want and more than that, who we are, because there is such a connection between who we are and the desires of our heart. But I think it can also even affect our ability to understand and discern God's will for our life. It can affect our ability to even be in touch with the desires that God is placing in us and the flames that he is trying to fan to move us in the direction that he wants us to go because we are so busy running ourselves ragged, keeping up with everyone else, keeping up with Instagram's standards or our relationships' expectations of us and the day-to-day grind and the responsibilities that we miss. We lose touch with what we want. And I would say a direct connection with what God wants for us. Sometimes in the moments of quiet and stillness, that's when I feel God speak to me. That's when I feel God prompt me. When I slow down to journal, and I don't have an agenda for the journal, and no one's going to see the journal, but I just write my thoughts. God is invited into that moment. God is invited to those pages where God will show me something that I want that I didn't know I wanted. Where God will show me something he wants for me that I didn't know he wanted for me. And sometimes they're really awesome things, and sometimes they're really scary things. When God told me to go to seminary, I was very scared of that. And I'm loving it. It's hard, but I'm loving it. Psalm 37:4 says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Of course, we know that God is not a genie in a bottle where you rub the lamp and get whatever you want. But as you delight in him, as you seek him, as you spend time with him in silence and solitude, as you pray, as you shut out all the voices of Instagram, social media, peer pressure, kids screaming for blueberries at 6 a.m., if you can have a moment to shut that out and you delight in him and you seek him, he can show you what you want. He will show you what you want. And more than that, he'll show you what he wants for you. And as we know, his plans for us are not only good, they are more than we could ever ask or imagine. So while it's good to think about what you want, and that's a great exercise and a good practice and important to get back in touch with, what's even better is asking God what he wants, because his plans are so much better than our plans. That's a great question. I hope this helps point you in the right direction to figure out what you want and what God wants for you. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for joining me as always. And for more encouragement on becoming the person you want to be, you can visit ChristyWright.com.
Mercy Me is coming to Pittsburgh, the Together Again tour with Mercy Me, Crowder, and special guest Andrew Rip, Thursday, October 5th. Bring your family and friends to the PPG Paints Arena in Pittsburgh for Mercy Me, Crowder, and Andrew Rip live in concert. 3 multiple award-winning artists on one stage for one night. Let your spirit soar, your heart sing, and your faith ignite. Mark your calendars for Thursday, October 5th. Get your tickets now at mercyme.org.